So welcome back to Energy First with Sarah and Jen. We have some special guests. I think this is the 12th episode now? 13th episode now. So I just want to go over the mission like we always do, what Energy First, the purpose of Energy First is. We developed the podcast to discuss education. So that's education both within the industry leading to careers, but also education in regards to the energy sector. We cover legislation, so that's both legislation that is currently in effect that's affecting our industry or has been proposed, and something that we that work in it as well as everybody in the country needs to worry about. And then last but not least, it is the people within the energy sector, which is by far the most important part of energy, particularly in Appalachia and all over the world. So just want to review some of our sponsors like we always do. So we have Deep Well Services are huge supporters of ours. Macuso's is a brand new platinum sponsor, so thank you to you guys. We appreciate you. And then Women's Energy Network have been huge sponsors of the podcast as well. So we are always looking for more support. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. We are going to change it up a little bit. We usually go through the events, but because filming's a little bit crazy, we're doing some like live coverage of different events and things like that. We're going to start putting the events calendar physically on the podcast after production, just so that we're not telling you about events that have already passed. That kind of defeats the purpose. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who is going to introduce our special guest for today.
Okay, so we have Ashley. I don't know if I know your last name.
It is Klingen Smith.
I wasn't going to attempt to pronounce it anyhow.
Yeah, you put it on me.
I married into that.
Oh, you did? What was it before?
It was very simple. It was 5 letters, Sisca.
And then Mary Beth Cirucci?
Cirucci. Yeah, I married into that name too.
You did?
And
What was yours?
messes it up.
What was your maiden name?
It was Harry.
Harry?
We both had simple ones and moved
Yeah.
on to difficult ones. And both of our lovely guests today are from an organization called Americans for Prosperity, which we're super excited to kind of discuss. And it's an organization that I just became aware of myself, even as an advocate within energy. I wasn't fully aware of you guys. So it's been an absolute blessing to get to know you and what your mission is. So super excited to kind of talk about that. But to start, can we maybe go with Mary Beth? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you ended up where you are now with Americans for Prosperity.
Okay, sure. Well, I started off being born and raised in the Pittsburgh area. Went to Penn State University. Didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, like most
None of
young
us
people.
do. Yeah.
Ended up graduating with a degree in general arts and sciences in the College of Liberal Arts, and I worked for about 10 years in the corporate world, in the computer industry, in inside sales and customer service support, which was extremely valuable because I learned how big corporations work, and I learned a lot of basic sales and communication skills.
Sure.
And then after about 10 years, I left that industry to go into small business with my husband, who had left the corporate world as well. And that gave me the ability to have flexibility and raise my sons. I had 2 children who are now 18 and 21.
They're beautiful. They have the most beautiful hair.
They are.
So I did that for probably another 10 years. Now I'm really aging myself. My story's a lot longer than hers because I'm older, right? So then, unfortunately, my husband passed away about 10 years ago, so that made me have to reinvent my career yet again. And I had this wonderful friend that is a mutual friend of ours named Jill, who said to me, "Would you run for state committee with me?" Which, for those who aren't listening, is a political organization of our party that, is involved of looking at candidates and approving candidates to run for office. And we were in different counties, and she said, "It would be fun if we both run for this, and we'll do it together." And I said, "Well, what if I win and you lose?" I said, "I don't want to do that." And if you know Jill, she doesn't lose anything, so that was pretty funny. But she said, "Well, if you don't win and nobody runs for the seat, they'll just appoint you for, you'll have to appoint somebody, they can appoint you." And I said, "Well, if it's meant to be, that's what'll happen." And what do you think happened? Nobody ran for the seat, and they appointed me, and that was my start in politics. So I was on state committee. I ran for school board. I'm now finishing my 8th year.
Oh, God bless you, because that's a
School Board.
difficult one. Yeah.
So that's a great training for having thick skin, because 50% of the population is always mad at you about something, especially
Or
when
more.
You're in,
Yeah.
or more. You have a target on
I'd
your
love to
back.
hear about that.
Yeah, that could be a whole
Like
other
how
podcast.
they, yeah.
8 years on
Can
school
we
board.
do that? Can we have just a what people who are mad at me say in the energy industry? That would be great.
And then that led to me working for 2 state representatives in the Pennsylvania State House, Eli Vankovich and Representative Bob Brooks, both great individuals. And Representative Brooks decided to retire about a little over a year ago. Today is the anniversary of my 1 year with Americans for Prosperity.
Congratulations! That's amazing.
So when Ashley heard that Representative Brooks was retiring, she gave me a call and she said, "What are you doing?" And the rest is history. I love being on the political advocacy side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's so much
it's
fun.
super important.
And we'll talk more about the organization, but it's a phenomenal organization. I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Aw, fantastic. Ashley, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I always say, been involved in politics kind of my whole life, literally from infancy. So
Oh my
if you think
gosh.
about a child's nursery, how they're often a theme, so they could be Noah's Ark or Winnie the Pooh. Like the theme of my nursery was Americana. So literally the Pennsylvania state motto, Virtue, Liberty, and Independence, was on the wall
Oh
in
my
my
gosh.
nursery. So I was raised by, a dad that was an Air Force pilot, my mom from
Very
Louisiana.
patriotic family.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. She was always pretty active in politics, and so,
And so your mom was from Louisiana.
she is.
So that's like the heart and soul of energy,
Yes.
obviously,
Oh,
right?
yes.
You know?
So it's so funny. My cousin's husband, Kalen, comes to Washington County regularly from their little town, Jonesville. Comes up here for like a month at a time and works. So it's such.
We have a
small
lot
world.
of them, and we have a lot of transplants from Louisiana up here too.
Yes.
Because the
We
energy
can't
sector-
understand them.
I can understand them. She
I
cannot.
can understand people from Louisiana.
I can't.
That's so funny. So yeah, no, I just went to school in Ohio to Denison University, came back, went to law school straight away, and decided that I wanted to work while being in law school. And so I worked for the majority whip at the time of the state senate. And then went to work briefly for the state party. And that year, 2012, was not a great year. And so there was one candidate that won. He was a freshman member of Congress, Keith Rothfuss. So went to work for that freshman congressman for a year and change. And just met the former state director of Americans for Prosperity at a few events. Loved what they were doing, and I've been here ever since. So 9 years.
Wow.
Just celebrated my 9th year. So.
Fantastic. That's
yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. So our listeners are very varied. We do have a lot of people in the energy sector that tune in, but we have a lot of people in the general public as well. And I'm sure both of them would love to hear exactly what is Americans for Prosperity. What is it that you guys do?
Well, I would say we were one of the most, influential grassroots, nonpartisan, nonprofit political advocacy organizations in the country. And what we do is that we believe that all Americans are capable of great things. But the problem is the government gets in the way a lot, right? And they create these boundaries and barriers for people that prevent them from living prevent them from living the American dream and reaching their fullest potential. So what we do is we focus on a lot of economic related, not so much social related issues, and we try to influence government policy and help people to remove those barriers and be the best that they can be. We believe in bottom-up solutions, not top-down. So we do a variety of things. You're probably wondering, how exactly do you influence policy, right? So we have a government affairs team. We have policy fellows that will actually write legislation and come up with solutions for big problems affecting America. We organize communities. We bring people together with common beliefs and missions, which is why we're here today. Mm-hmm. I met Sarah about 9 months ago.
She had a girl crush on you because you had reached out to me after, and I said, Mary Beth wants to meet with you. She's like, oh my gosh, I met her at this conference and she's amazing.
Yeah, I totally did. I totally had a girl crush on you.
Well,
You complimented my dress. You said it looked like a border dress.
On.
And I was like, oh my gosh.
It was a Marcella Shale Coalition. It was the first energy event that I went
Was it
to.
Shale Insight?
Shale
In
Insight up in
Erie.
Erie, yeah.
Mhm. And I knew I think one person that was going to be there. And I walked in, and there's this group of ladies that were women in energy standing there. So I went up to them and said, hi.
And they're
how are you
very
guys?"
welcoming,
And,
right?
yeah, and
Like,
we've
yeah.
been in touch ever since.
Yeah.
And that led me to you. And the person that led me to you was also someone I had met at that same event.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're here, because we have a common goal of promoting the energy industry.
Absolutely.
So this is one of the things that I do in my job as coalitions director, is find people like you with mutual beliefs that we can try to work together and get that message out. We also have an education and training team. We train grassroots activists. We train people on policy issues.
Wait, I had to ask you in the bathroom before we came out here. I'm not like very well versed in politics, right? So I didn't even really know what grassroots meant.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain what that is?
It's a great question. So I always say, like, if you go, whether it's to our state capital in Harrisburg or to our nation's capital in D.C., there are so many individuals there representing special interests, but there is no one just representing like the hard-working taxpayer, right? There is someone for every little niche business, industry, issue.
And it's usually self-serving, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's coming at the expense of all of us.
Yeah.
And so we always say, like, think of us as the advocates for the least organized, most underrepresented constituency of them all, which is just like the hardworking taxpayer trying to keep a little bit more of what they earn.
And especially people in energy. I mean, we work 90 hours a week.
Exactly.
Like, I can't stress to people. I was just talking to one of my friends that's a company man, and they were like, okay, so a lot of people assume we do 6 to 6. He's like, no, I'm up at 3, and then there's a safety meeting at 5. He said, realistically, I'm getting 3 hours of sleep, and I do that for 3 weeks straight.
Wow.
So,
And that's common. It's
and
not
that's
just
common.
the one
That's
guy.
all of them, right? So when do they actually have time to fight for anything for themselves? Like, they need individuals and groups like yourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we always say, like, we meet people where they are. And so we sometimes, like, advocacy can literally be a retweet of something we put out that is tagging a member of a committee that we're trying to encourage to move a bill. Because before it can get to the full House or the full Senate, it's got to come out of committee. And so advocacy can literally be a retweet, or it could be accompanying us to a member meeting in the district right here. So, for example, Congressman Guy Reschenthaler represents where we sit. We'll go in and visit him in the district office. But then a couple weeks ago, I was on Capitol Hill and went into his office there. And there's some of our activists across the Commonwealth that prefer to do Capitol visits. But then there's some that are like, no way, I want to go to the district. Or then there's some that say, hey, I'd rather Zoom, or I'd rather just tweet something. And so we really do try to meet people where they are and make, advocacy the easiest it can possibly be. But at the end of the day, like, the guys and gals serving you, whether it's in Harrisburg, there's 253 of them between the House and Senate, or in Washington, there's 535 between the U.S. Senate and the House. They care about keeping their job. And as a voter, like, you are the principal person they are trying to keep happy. And so when you tell them to do something, they typically listen. And having worked for a member of the state Senate and U.S. Congress, like, I can tell you, when they get 10 touches on any given issue, policy, bill, that raises the flags.
Really? Just 10? That's all it takes?
Absolutely.
No, but the problem is, the bulk of our population and our industry isn't even aware of what's going on out there, right? They are just heads down working. And I think that there's a real disconnect. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to start the conversation between ourselves. It's like, how do we make those synergies? Where do we go to make sure that those individuals are aware of these pending things that could really, really hinder our way of life, right?
And we try to make it easy for people. One other really easy way for them to get involved and let their voice be heard is through our letter writing campaign that we have on our website.
Absolutely. And I know you were going to post this, but we just encourage folks to go to americansforprosperity.org. The first button you can click when you go to our main website says Take Action. And the banner action that we are encouraging people to take right now is entitled Unleash America's Energy Abundance. When folks take that action, it takes under 60 seconds. First name, last name, cell phone number, zip code, email. You sign the letter, it goes right to the inbox of Senator Casey. And I know we're going to talk about legislation in a moment, But Speaker McCarthy in the House has acted on a number of pro-energy bills. It is now time for us to hold senators accountable for their inaction. There's only so much one chamber can do. When the other chamber is not willing to act, it's time to hold them accountable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So going a little bit further back, just with Americans for Prosperity, I know that you guys have various mission statements. Do you want to kind of run through the kind of subject matter that you guys usually work with or on?
Absolutely. So we look at public policy through 9 lenses. So we work on everything from, immigration to criminal justice to foundational education, K-12 policy, to free speech issues. But I'll tell you, when people think about what our our niche issue is, it really is defending folks' pocketbooks and allowing you to keep more of what you earn. And so under that kind of economic progress banner, we work on fiscal reform and regulatory reform. And under regulations, that's where we get into energy.
Absolutely.
And it is in Pennsylvania, our Pennsylvania chapter is one of 37 across the nation of Americans for Prosperity. But energy is a big, big issue for us. And we have, 19 members of our federal delegation between 17 congressmen and 2 U.S. senators that are instrumental in those 435 members in the U.S. House and 50 over in the Senate to get good things done.
Yeah.
And so also in Harrisburg, I certainly want to talk about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and the threat that poses to folks from Washington County up to Wayne and everywhere in between. So I would say, while we work on healthcare, immigration, all those issues, energy really is a big focus here in the Commonwealth.
I mean, and a lot of the other things that you guys are concentrating all hinge on energy anyhow. I think a lot of people miss that point, and when we talk about it all of the time, I mean, there's not a single thing that we touch or deal with on a daily basis that doesn't revert back to energy.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, it is kind of the base of everything that we're really talking about.
But most people are afraid to talk about that, which is why it's so important to have, organizations such as yours.
Absolutely.
Because
This is a quote from one of our policy statements on energy, and it sums up what you just said. It says, "In everything we do in our daily lives, abundant, affordable, and reliable energy is the key driver of our prosperity and security. A robust and diverse supply guided by market signals, free of handouts and contradictory rules, is essential for economic prosperity."
And it gives me chills when we talk about our security, because that's something that's really at the forefront of my mind, just with things that are happening around the world. I think people are really, no matter how many times we touch on it, missing on the point of how dependent we have become on other sources of energy, and there's no reason for it. It's physically under our feet, and that's absolutely terrifying to me. I don't think people truly understand the repercussion to our food chain, to all of our basic essential things that we have here, because we're failing, and there's no reason to be failing. It's permitting, it's regulation, it's all of the things that you guys are fighting against that is causing us to fail.
That's exactly right. And I think this current administration took a bold stance day one when they canceled and revoked some of the key permits needed for the Keystone Pipeline. So they did that. They made it more difficult to get oil leases in both the Gulf and in Alaska. And then they have stacked on top of each other regulations that make even maintaining existing refineries so darn difficult that folks are just saying, hey, close shop here and move elsewhere. And like you said, we should be a net exporter.
Yes.
And this is not just about business in this state. It's about jobs.
Oh, yeah.
And, it doesn't really matter if we're in the Southwest or Northeast or up in Erie or in Philadelphia. Pennsylvanians want an agenda in D.C. and from Harrisburg that makes our lives more affordable. That is what we hear over and over, frankly, across the political spectrum. And energy is ground zero for doing that right here.
Yeah,
as you said.
When I met Mary Beth the first time, she told me about one of the things that you did at a gas station, which I was like, I'm not going to swear, but I was like, heck yeah, I love that. Can we do that here? I was so excited. Can you tell us what you did? Because that was just so cool.
Well, when Joe Biden took office and inflation, started to skyrocket, and everybody saw gas prices go from $2.38 a gallon to over $5 a gallon. So part of our economic policy was, talking about inflation, but it comes right back to gas and energy. So we, our company came up with a true cost of Washington tour, we called it, and we lowered the price of gas to $2.38 a gallon, which was what it was when Joe Biden took office, and we paid the difference for people. And we did 8 total true cost events throughout the state over that summer, and we had lines of people. We made the news because there was traffic jams.
Wow, that's cool.
We took that as an opportunity to try to educate people on the bad policies that were driving up gas prices.
Yeah.
So we try to use the opportunity to do something good for people, give them a little relief. We heard their stories. We heard a lot of heartbreaking stories about people who, they were crying because they could get gas at that price, and that meant that, they could buy more food that week, or they could get their medicine.
It breaks my heart. I can't count the number of times that I've been in the gas station buying whatever in the morning, and there's a young lady or a young man, and they're literally putting like $7 of gas in.
Right.
And I'm like, how the heck is that even getting you 4 miles down the road?
Yeah, and then the price of their food is also way more expensive.
Because that's what they can afford right now. That's literally how much they can afford to put in their vehicle. It's just...
One of the individuals we met in Lower Burrell at one of our very first price drop events, her name was Elaine, and she shared with us, she was one of the first people in line that morning, but she shared that her husband had just recently been diagnosed with throat cancer, and they were straddling physicians at 3 different health systems. And their
to get
principal
the best care. Right?
Exactly, to
yeah.
get the best care. So they were kind of navigating 3 different hospitals around the Pittsburgh area. And she said what was more weighing on their hearts and minds each week was how they were going to get gas to go to their appointments rather than his throat cancer diagnosis. And it was so startling and jarring to us. But right there, right on the spot, we were giving everyone getting their gas a note card with a QR code, and they were sending Bob Casey an email right there at the gas pump saying, Senator, we demand better. And so it was just an empowering moment because we were enabling them to take action. And, Senator Casey did write back to everyone that sent that note. I did and received a response. And he does not agree with our policy platform and our energy portfolio, but he did respond. And the only way
so he's paying attention, right? That's
Absolutely.
The thing.
And the only way we can hold these guys accountable is if we can say, hey, Senator, we know that 17,000 Pennsylvanians asked you to encourage your leader, Chuck Schumer, to run H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Costs Act. What are you doing? 17,000 people
Talking about
asking.
that, do you want to tell us what that is?
Absolutely. So this is the most comprehensive pro-energy bill that Congress has passed in a very long time. So they took legislation from 3 different committees of jurisdiction, combined it all into one big omnibus bill, passed it. I will say every single Republican member of Congress was a yes, except one. And that member is actually from just outside of Philadelphia. So there was one lone defector in the Republican caucus, and then there were 4 Democrats that voted for the bill. So this was a bipartisan piece of legislation. And I think the biggest things to note is that it certainly streamlines permitting. It repeals nearly $30 billion, in taxpayer-funded handouts to politically preferred industries and activist groups, which we do not think Washington should be choosing winners and losers in this industry. It lifts barriers to production so that we can kind of have more activity in the energy sector going on across the nation.
Which is wonderful, but if we can't get the permits to drill and we can't build the pipelines to put the product into, it really doesn't serve much of a purpose, unfortunately.
Yes, well, and it eliminates a new tax on natural gas infrastructure, which we think is really important. But H.R. 1 And that bill number is significant because leaders choose bill numbers, and they made that bill HR 1 for a reason. This 118th Congress, they wanted to signal energy is our first priority. And so we love that. We did a pretty robust effort across the state. But when you couple that with the Unshackle Act, which has not been reintroduced yet this session, but will be, which really does reform agency permitting processes, whether that is, the EPA or the Department of the Interior or the Department of Energy, all of those are standing in the way. And so the Unshackle Act would do a whole lot in regard to
So is that a federal, that's a federal level? So it's not dealing with like DEP permitting on a more local basis, just
You
out of
got it.
curiosity.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
It's a
got
federal
it.
bill.
Yeah, okay. That's wonderful
So,
though.
yeah.
The downside is that Senator Schumer said he won't even run the bill in the Senate.
Yeah, and he's not wanting to endanger some of those Democrats that are going to have to be responsive to their electorate next year. But this is not an election year. This is 2023, a federal election year, I should say, and we need to hold these guys accountable before they get on a ballot.
And the truth of the
Now
matter
is the
is, I mean, I'm talking to people on all sides of the fence, and everybody is fed up with what we're paying, with what's actually going on. I mean, I can't think of a single person. No, there's been a couple, but they're extremists. Everybody in general is upset. So, I mean, I don't really understand why they're taking the stance that they are when the actual population on both sides of the fence is upset.
I think there's a little disconnect with the everyday public on why energy prices are high too, because some sides of the political aisle will play the blame game.
Sure.
They'll blame Ukraine war or Putin or so that's one of our
Or they'll blame the
Big oil companies.
big oil companies that have kept profits. Did you see that I posted Apple's profits for last year compared to like BP? And I mean, it's like 4 times as much. But they're going to shout and scream about ourselves keeping those funds without even looking how those funds are reinvested.
Yeah, but they didn't want to be at negative 17 like in 2020.
Correct. So they're paying back stakeholders, number one. But number two, the biggest investment that they're investing in is into more processes, making our industry more efficient and more environmentally friendly. But we're going to ignore that's where the money's being spent, right? What's Apple doing to fund research on lowering greenhouse gases and everything else that we're doing as an industry? I guarantee you it's definitely imbalanced if we were to look at that, for sure.
Yeah, and I think folks don't necessarily just recall the fact that navigating all of the red tape that is put up by these federal and state agencies, the injunctions folks have to fight in a court of law against and around, and all of the new regulations, like that costs money, and that is passed on to us. And, and that's just inevitable. And so starting to address some of the duplicative nature of what's happening at federal and state levels, that is all things that people are working on. But again, to keep folks like Bob Casey, John Tester, senator out in Montana, right over in Ohio, we have Sherrod Brown, to keep those guys from having to make votes on the issues that Americans are saying are most pressing and most important is wrong. And we've got to, again, hold them accountable. And we can't do that unless we have people taking action. So,
yeah, and the other thing, because I've dabbled a little bit in local politics, more so than yourself, Sarah, and I think what I was really surprised about, and it makes total sense, okay? So you elect somebody to an office does not immediately make them an expert in every single thing that every American is worrying about, okay? They are depending on individuals and groups like yourselves to educate them on issues appropriately and help them write that legislation. I mean, you can't expect a guy or a lady who has never had direct experience with the energy sector to know the truth and to know what they're talking about when they're making those decisions on legislation. They have to rely on organizations like yourselves. And I don't think like the general public gets that. They just assume, well, we've elected these people. They must know everything that they're supposed to do for it. Well, that's not true. They're an average individual. You're hoping that they're a good person and that they're going to do the right thing. but they're going to have to rely on organizations like yourselves to actually gain the knowledge.
Well, and a lot of times we'll provide witnesses for hearings where they're getting information from that too. So that's another way people can connect with us. We have, in your industry, there's experts on this, and there's a hearing coming up. We might say, hey, would you be willing to do a Zoom testimony? Or would you be willing to write an op-ed? Or would you be willing to come and testify?
And we've had a few guests that might even be good. Like Greg would be great.
Oh, Greg would
for that.
be great.
Yeah, you guys should check out that episode. He's
Was that the
amazing.
pipeline? I've listened to several.
So Kyle Flanagan, and so it's difficult. There are some individuals that it's very difficult for the operators to give them permission if they're directly employed. But then we do have other individuals that are a little bit more independent, like Greg, who works for Shale Crescent, and they do a lot of education on hydraulic fracturing because that's such a pinch point for everybody. They think fracking is going to make the entire world die when actually it's not at all. And he is very knowledgeable about that. So
Shell Crescent's major purpose is to encourage us to have local manufacturing right where the energy is in order to decrease the cost and increase
which fits
the
in
efficiency.
with what you guys are doing too.
And he's a really good speaker. He is on the radio. He's on the radio.
Yeah, we can definitely connect you guys.
Yeah,
I think
we'll
he would be
connect
good for you.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the other types of legislation that you guys that are really really at the forefront of your minds right now, either good or bad?
Yeah, well, I really want to touch on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative at the state level. And so Governor Wolf entered us into this northeastern consortium of states. There's 10.
This is terrible, so people pay attention.
Yes, this is a just quintessential cap and trade program, $800 million tax price tag. It would increase family rates by about 30%. Higher energy costs, obviously, but this also means thousands of jobs, and we are literally then, as a Commonwealth, going to be subsidizing our neighbors in Ohio and West Virginia to do the energy work that we otherwise would be doing here. Of course, this was done in the name of CO2 reduction, but over the past decade, I think it needs to be said, Pennsylvania has reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 40%, which has kept us on pace with RGGI states. And so, for us, we ask the question, is a carbon tax really the only way to reduce emissions? It lacks total creativity and trust in Pennsylvanians to do the right thing. And I just shared, Pennsylvanians are doing the right thing without the heavy hand of Harrisburg in the first place. And so
we're the leading state in the nations from 2005 to 2019 for carbon emission reduction.
As an industry, we've reduced
without
it.
RGGI.
Yeah.
Amazing.
As an industry, we've reduced it 0.5% every year since 1980. Wow. Personally. So it doesn't make any sense.
The regulation's on hold right now because of the Commonwealth Court kind of weighing a couple of different cases. Governor Shapiro, now Governor Shapiro, then candidate Shapiro, had said he had some concerns about RGGI. But I'll tell you, in his budget address, just what was it, last month or 2 months ago now, he included RGGI in his budget. And so we are keeping a very close eye on it. But again, if you go to americansforprosperity.org, click Take Action, there is a RGGI petition as well that will go directly to both your state senator and state representative and the office of the governor. So one 60-second action will go to 3 different inboxes. And we have sent thousands and thousands of letters into the legislature. We've testified on this. And so I think they are listening. There is again legislation.
There's inaction.
Yeah, the legislation that's been introduced that would just basically say, hey, any new tax shouldn't even emanate from an executive order from the executive branch. It should be going through the legislature.
So is it just a new carbon tax? Isn't it? I don't know. I read it a while ago, like a month about RGGI, but it isn't just a carbon tax. It's like a huge.
Right. It is a true cap and trade program where we're going to be as one of 11.
Well, the legislature didn't vote
Explain
on it either.
what
It's
a cap and trade
an
program is, I think,
executive
because
order.
we do probably have listeners that aren't aware what that means.
Yeah, so we will go ahead and send you the link to our kind of one pager about Reggie so folks can read all about it. But essentially, we are going to be able to emit a certain amount of proscribed carbon. And when we reach that threshold, we're then going to have to pay to emit more. And so to us, like this sort of arbitrary like nature of how much and when is just totally antithetical to what's already been happening in Pennsylvania, which is amazing stewardship of our environment by the industry and by everyday Pennsylvanians making different choices about how they're living their lives and navigating the world. You know, the Independent Fiscal Office said emissions reductions for the 10 Reggie states were 47% compared to non-participating states at 42%.
Well, of course, because there's no incentive for them to do so.
Exactly.
And so you take that money out of these operators' budgets, and they're going to have to cut their drilling programs, their fracking programs. They're going to have to move their operation to other states, which is going to take away direct jobs, which is going to take away indirect jobs with our hotels, our restaurants. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. And when we
produce
look
in less responsibly sourced states.
Correct.
So
Exactly.
Pennsylvania really is. If you listen to our Kyle Flanagan episode, we go into depth about how much more responsible we are.
It is. And if you take
With
that money
production.
out of the budgets, there's no money in those budgets to put into further research to reduce these things anyhow. I mean, it's completely counterproductive. It just doesn't even make any logical sense to do it.
Yes. And, you know, one of the things we hear over and over is like, how do I know how my member stands on that? And I want to encourage everyone. So last legislative session in Harrisburg, so the 2021-2022 legislative session, there were votes on repealing Reggie in the House and in the Senate. It went to Governor Wolf. He vetoed it, and the House actually did a veto override vote. So there are multiple on-the-record stances from members of the General Assembly
So
in
you
Harrisburg.
know who your representative, what they're
You can
thinking.
see
Yes,
Yeah.
and so what I want to encourage everyone to do is visit PATaxpayerScorecard.com, PATaxpayerScorecard.com. We create a scorecard each year. We send out key vote alerts to members and we say, hey, we're putting you on the record. In 2 hours when you make this vote, it's going on our scorecard. We key voted every one of those Reggie votes. So that is a big part of the 41 bills we decided to vote or key vote over 2 years. Reggie had a number of those 41 votes. So we just encourage people, go to PATaxpayerScorecard.com, see where your members stood. And if they were on the wrong side of history and they are still in office, encourage them to do better. Like we always say to members that have a D or F on our scorecard, like you can only go up from there.
Yeah.
And you are still in office.
And that's another way that we hold people accountable. We hold the legislators accountable for their votes.
Absolutely.
And they know when they're going to get scored, and then we publish their scores.
You guys keep record of their votes, then give them a report card? Is that
We
what
sure
keynoting
do.
their
It's
votes
so
mean?
that you and I can make an informed decision. Is the
Absolutely.
bottom
No,
of
it's
the
not
line.
every vote. When she said we're going to key vote it, that means this is something that Americans for Prosperity is watching you on and grading you on your performance. So like I mentioned, we don't get involved in social issues, so we're not going to score them, on every single bill that comes by. But if it's on an economic issue, if it's on our criminal justice or
Energy.
education or, the things that we said that we support, those are the things that when they're important and they come up, we key vote them. She sends a letter to them saying, we support this bill. We're going to key vote you on this, which to them means we're watching and we're going to score you and it's going to count into your overall grade.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the legislation, you can see their grades. So we've got, from
They have a
A's
sense
to
of
F.
accountability.
Yeah. And we a lot of times will send, positive mail into some of their constituents' mailboxes saying, hey, Senator Bartolotta, right here, actually, Senator Bartolotta is number one on our mid-session scorecard, full session scorecard, from 2021 to 2022. Number one senator in the state Senate on our issues.
For our grades, yeah.
So we did, a boosted ad in her district letting folks know, we think accountability is a two-sided coin. We
Sure.
can't just beat these guys
Right,
up
yeah.
when they're
People
doing
do
their own
good.
thing.
We praise them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, we give
I
them
love that.
positive publicity when they do what we think is right.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a lot, and I know we have more to discuss, but I think it would be really good if we put a recap of kind of the legislation that's really pressing in relation to our industry after this podcast on our website and at the end of this, and a link to where they can go and take action.
Absolutely.
I'd actually like to take it a little step further and potentially reach out to some of the companies that are having regular safety meetings and give them something that they can hand to those guys so that it's super easy. I don't know if you guys have a QR code
Absolutely.
type situation, because
We
that's
can
what
do
they're
that.
going to use. Just because I know the message is not getting to these guys. And the reason I know that, I'm not going to say which party I was at the booth of at the Washington County Fair, but I think everybody that knows me can guess. Volunteering the whole time. And every guy that passed me with an oil-filled hat on, I'd stop them and I'd be like, hey, buddy, I know Billy that you work for. Like, you got a day off, you know? Are you enjoying the fair? Are you registered to vote? No, ma'am. No. I mean, probably 9 out of 10 of the guys that
Well, I
I
think that's
stopped. And I
another-
was like, number one, what are we doing as companies that we're not reaching out to our employees? And I reached out to one of our government affairs individuals at one of our operators, and I said, hey, I thought you guys did like drives to inform our workers of what's coming up as far as legislation is concerned, making sure that they're registered to vote. And they're like, yeah, we do in the office. I'm like, okay, so that's 200 people. What about the 8,000 people that are working in the field or more for your particular company and all the subsidy companies, right? So it's how do we reach them?
You and I talked about this previously.
Yeah.
You know, and
'Cause if they
these
don't
are such
know-
hardworking people. They don't have time to vote, or they're on the road.
They don't know about this legislation, and
they
this is
don't
stuff that's
know.
directly impacting
That's right.
them.
And they need to engage and exercise their right to vote. They need to engage a little bit politically, you know, and we're here to try to help educate
Like
on that
it,
and make it
love it,
easier
or
for them.
otherwise, right?
But
yeah.
I mean, it's like your career and this industry is under
Your
attack.
family.
Like, you have to get engaged in the
country.
game.
Yeah.
You have to get engaged in the game if you want to, you know, keep energy independent and bring the energy jobs back to
Absolutely.
Pennsylvania. And there's ways that you can do that, and we're going to try to help you do that. But and even for people that travel, I mean, we take advantage of the mail-in voting.
Oh,
you know?
I agree.
But absolutely need to get the word out to get more people to get engaged in what's going on in the energy sector.
Absolutely.
with political-
And I think the mailing voting, there's just a lot of people that feel a lot of different ways. But I do feel, first of all, it's a system that's not going anywhere. So we need to embrace it.
That's
okay.
right.
And we need to utilize it for our purposes to make sure that our voices are heard. And I think it's an ideal way for people in our industry in particular. I don't know where I'm going to be on any daily basis. I
Right.
was 30 minutes late for this podcast because I was trying to finish up something that absolutely had to be done. You have no idea if you work in energy whether you're going to be able to vote on the day or not.
Right.
So you need to make sure that you have that paperwork so that your voice is still heard. Contrary to whatever nonsense everybody's been fed, we need to utilize that system for sure across the whole country, but in particular in the energy sector.
Well, I do have a question about what you were saying earlier about getting the support from the top down and then having it trickle to the 9 out of 10 guys that were at the career fair. A lot of times the people at the top are reluctant to push any agenda because of fear.
I'm not talking about pushing an agenda.
just encouraging people to vote.
Encourage people to vote. I don't care how you vote, but there have been many people that died for the right for you to do so. I don't care how you do it. I just want
get
you to
engaged.
vote. That's
Yeah.
it. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not
They
going to
don't
tell
have
you what
them
to
how
do.
vote. Just register to vote and get engaged.
But they should
part
be
of the
telling their
process.
employees to be pro-energy because we're all energy.
Sure, but if they're not comfortable doing so, I don't care what you say. Just get them to vote.
Yeah.
Allow them to vote. Figure out how
we'll
to do
educate you the best we can on the policies.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah,
can make
that's why
up
we
your
need
own
people
mind.
like you.
it. Yeah, with truth and fact, right? Not some of the
right.
other stuff. So what's some of the other things that you guys are working on?
Well, I think these are the big things that I think your audience would be,
Yeah.
like most in tune with.
So
and
can you recap
care most about?
the ones that you guys have discussed that are really pressing and remind us again where we can go to
Yes.
take action?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, before you do that, there is a couple other things that we're going to be doing that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, please.
You know, one thing that we're starting to do is storytelling, because storytelling shows not only legislators but public and citizens.
And what do you mean by storytelling?
how For example, an energy policy has impacted a community, a business, right? A town where the energy plant shut down.
Are you doing this for both positive experiences as well as negative?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we would do both. If it's
Like
if
I'm
it's
talking about
impacted.
impact taxes, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, this is money that's being put into our local communities and spent on improvements. So I think that's a story too, right? Positive
Yeah.
one.
Did you realize that sometimes when people are sitting in Harrisburg or they're sitting in Washington, D.C., and they vote on a law that sounds really great, but they don't realize how it really impacts people? Well, we can go and find people that it really impacts and share that. Share that good and share that bad. Because people respond more to emotional, real stories than just reading about a policy.
Sure.
Or reading stats or, percentages and numbers, right? You want to engage with people and hear, like, how is this really impacting their life and their businesses and their communities? So we're looking for stories to tell, and then we'll share
Well,
those.
that's definitely something we can probably help you with too. It's certainly why we are doing a lot more field visits, is physically going out there and talking to the individuals that are working in the industry so they can tell their stories. So maybe we can help you with that too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if people are listening and they can reach out to us. And then on June 1st, we're going to be announcing another campaign like we did last summer. We did the True Cost of Washington.
If it is cool as that one, I'm so coming and helping you guys.
Well, the only thing I'll tell you is that we'll focus on energy.
Okay.
It will focus on the rampant inflation, labor reforms that we need to get America back on track again.
Okay, I'm
We're
really
launching
interested.
it.
Yeah, is it going to
June
be as cool
1st.
as last year's?
I hope so.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
definitely want to be involved.
I like the theme. It's going to be kind of patriotic.
I'm excited.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
Is
yes.
it going to be Ashley's nursery thing?
Yeah, I was just thinking that too.
There'll be lots of red, white, and blue.
I love it.
Well, we talked about HR 1, and I think that is the big omnibus energy bill, the lower energy costs.
And where would someone
act.
go for a recap of that? I mean, because it's so large, like where could they go to read the key points?
Absolutely. So we will send you that
Okay.
because we have a standalone blog post on like
That'd be great.
the highlights of the bill. Again, it encompassed bills from 3 different committees, lumped it all into one. So there were literally
24 bills, I think.
Yeah, it was 17,
17.
That all came into one bill. And so we will direct you to that
be
blog
great.
post so folks can see about that. And then the Strategic Production Response Act, I think we talked about this at the top of our time together, but the president made a decision when gas prices were double what they were when he took office last summer to start drawing down the reserves last year for political reasons. It is not because we were
disingenuous.
facing a
No
national
emergency.
security threat or an emergency. So what this legislation would do is limit the drawdown until the Department of Energy submits to Congress a plan to increase the percentage of federal lands that are leased for oil and gas production. And so we think that is such a common sense way to address the kind of overreach of federal agencies, while also making sure there are some checks on when an administration can touch what we have all, as residents of America, have said, this is for a extraordinary
Emergency, yeah.
circumstance, not a way to put a Band-Aid on the policies that you enacted the day you put your hand on the Bible and became president.
Wait a second. Did he do that to decrease the prices?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was all for political gain.
Yes,
Whenever it's
absolutely.
reserved for
Supposed to be
emergencies.
emergency reserve.
Absolutely.
So we'll be totally screwed if we have emergency. Well, we won't be screwed, but there's potential for us being in a real predicament.
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and it sets this precedent that for non-emergency situations, we should think about that as an option, and that should never be on the table. And so again, all Republicans in the U.S. House were a yes vote. One Democrat was a yes, so it was a bipartisan vote. We cannot get a vote from Chuck Schumer in the U.S. Senate. Unacceptable. So again, going to americansforprosperity.org, clicking Take Action. There is also a letter about the Strategic Production Response Act. So I think that, coupled with HR 1, coupled with the state threat of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, those are the 3 things that people in this sector or anyone listening that cares
Well, it
about their
affects
energy
everybody.
prices
Yeah.
should care deeply about.
Yeah, I agree. So you guys can get us a recap
Absolutely.
of those 3 real key issues.
Absolutely.
And then where do individuals go one more time to take
Absolutely.
action?
Yep. So go to americansforprosperity.org. The first button you'll see right there when you go to that website is Take Action. Click that. It'll take you to our Action Center where there are petitions, there are letters to officials, there are surveys. But the banner letter to officials is around HR1, and it's going to go to the inbox of Bob Casey, and that is what we desperately need people to act on. I'll also just say follow us on Twitter if you're on there at AFP Pennsylvania.
We're going to post all of your tags too. I think
Perfect.
that's, and then
Amazing.
Where do we go for those scorecards one more time?
Yes, PATaxpayerScorecard.com.
And that's where we can see the past voting record on issues that are really important to us in the energy sector as well as Americans at large.
You got
So
it.
go in there and see what these people are doing so that you can hold them accountable for sure.
Exactly.
You got it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to do a recap. I would love to do some sort of flyer, guys, that we can start getting out to these service companies.
Oh, and give you a little plug. We will be at your Appalachian Pipeliners
Oh, yes.
fundraising event.
That's May
With the table.
19th.
So come on
Yes.
out to that and visit Mary Beth and Ashley.
Yes,
at that
absolutely.
event.
We're looking forward. It better be good weather. I hope it's really good
Yeah,
weather.
me too.
Yeah. We just booked our band. He's a guy, Mark Caskey from Steel Nation. He's really
Okay.
good. Really, really good. Do you know Mark?
Yes, I went to visit
Have you ever
Congressman Mark
heard him
Kelly
play?
with Mark.
Have you ever heard him play his band and stuff? He is
No.
phenomenal, literally phenomenal. So we're gonna have him there. So that's super exciting. It's gonna be a really good day.
But I
I'm looking
went
forward
with
to it.
him and John Gallo to visit Mike Kelly to talk about energy.
Yes, went to many previous president rallies with Mark Caskey. We were kind of the two that helped get all of those energy people up on the stage with our previous president. So
Oh, how
yeah,
neat.
we definitely got closer through those experiences for sure.
Yeah.
So, but we do need to put some sort of a flyer, I think, with the key issues that we're discussing in regards to energy. If that's possible, we can help with the funding for that, I'm sure, through one of our our sponsorships. But I would like to get those out
Absolutely.
to these guys, and then we'll put it on our website and the our various social media pages too.
That would be incredible.
Yeah. It's so important, guys. I really want to thank you guys for coming. Any final thoughts from yourselves?
Final thoughts are just be engaged at whatever level you find comfortable. And we're here to value kind of the 3 T's of politics: time, talent, treasure. Everyone has something to offer. Some people that's writing a check. Some people that is physically going into an office for direct lobbying experience. Some people, again, it's just retweeting something. And so we're here to honor whatever you're willing to do and give. But as a grassroots organization, our voice is only as big as what we can scale across all 67 counties in Pennsylvania. And so the more people that take action with us on things like those
Any kind of
letters-
action.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The better. And so we just in advance thank everyone that takes some time to help us.
And we appreciate it. I mean, it's a lot, I think, for individuals to kind of take in, right? It can be very, very overwhelming, and you have to take it in small pieces. So I think putting this information together will definitely help our listeners really realize some of the things that are truly pressing here in Pennsylvania that could affect us. And we just want to thank you guys for being
Yeah.
here.
Well, we're really
Thank you.
grateful to have both of you in our lives
Yes.
and for inviting us on the show
Yes.
to just promote good policy.
It's
and
funny
promote
because I think
energy.
we're trying to do the same thing, right?
are,
Both
yeah.
organizations just need to work together a little bit more on it, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you
Thank
guys
you.
for coming.
Thank you so
And
much.
this has been another episode of Energy First with Sarah and Jet.